Hello and welcome to India's World. The balance of power in West Asia seems to be changing. This change is being prompted by the fight against the rise of the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, the nuclear deal between Iran and the Western powers, and the change in US strategy for the region. With local players taking up an active role in dealing with the complexities of the Middle East, there is jockeying for power in the region. The competition between Saudi Arabia and Iran has increased. The Sunni Arab nations find themselves sharing the fear of a resurgent Iran with Israel, a traditional adversary, and Turkey seems to be cautiously re-entering its former sphere of influence, trying to balance the Saudi-Iran rivalry. To discuss the emerging balance of power in the Middle East, we have with us three distinguished experts. We have with us Ambassador Ranjit Gupta. He served as India's ambassador to Yemen, Venezuela, Oman, Thailand, and Spain. And finally, he was also head of India's representation in Taiwan. We have with us Professor Ashwini Mahapatra, professor at the Center for West Asian Studies, School of International Studies at Jawaharlal Nehru University. He's an expert on Turkey, the rise of radical Islam in West Asia, and knows the region well. And we have with us our old friend, Dr. Wael Awad, a renowned journalist. He's the chief of bureau of the Syrian Arab news agency SANA in Delhi. So I welcome you gentlemen to this discussion. Ambassador Gupta, let me begin with you. Do you think the battle lines in the Middle East are changing? And what are the factors that are pushing the region's major powers, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Iran, to rethink old relationships and re-strategize their approach to the region?
The geopolitical map of West Asia is now under transformation, a fairly radical transformation. But this is an ongoing process which is going to take some time. At the end of that, possibly a decade or so, it will be very different from what it was till, say, taking a date arbitrarily, till the date when the so-called Arab Spring began. It is going to be a completely changed West Asia.
What is the direction of that change?
The direction of the change is that countries of the region are going to play a far more important role than they played earlier. Earlier, they were more pawns. First of all, in the superpower battle between the Soviet Union, superpower struggle between the Soviet Union and the USA. Later on, as pawns of the US in US's post-Cold War unipolar movement. Now, with President Obama's new approach and a little distance that the US is going to be putting in between itself and the local actors, it will be the local actors and their interplay which will determine the map.
Yeah. Professor Mahapatra, do you agree with Ambassador Gupta, and do you think that this is also evident in the multilateral Arab action against Yemen, where US has taken a secondary role? It is only providing intelligence and logistics and asking them, use your air force, use your military capability, which we have helped you build over so many years, and fight your own battles, but we'll give you only secondary help.
It's true to an extent, I tell you. See, the Americans are at the moment not directly involved in the civil war kind of situation in Yemen. But there's a possibility. There's Americans, see, suppose you have a change of administration in America. So anything can change. America can go back to this unilateral policy adopted by the previous administration. There's a possibility.
2 years hence.
Yes, there's a possibility, and you cannot simply ignore the American entrance in terms of securing the protection of the Jewish state of Israel. So you look at this kind of the cacophony of protests raised by the Israeli side in the wake, just in the event of this entire nuclear deal with Iran. And second most important, the Americans' over-dependence, not only the secure supply of oil, but also the American products. And they are the biggest, the buyers of the American arms, particularly Saudis. Who are going to buy arms from America? The entire economic, American economy is to an extent dependent on this, the petrodollars.
My question was in the context of changing balance of power. Do you think the balance of power is changing?
See, you need to take into account the dependency structural relationship between the America and the West on the one side and the West Asian countries in general, particularly the Arab countries. And thereby that explains the Americans, the likelihood of the American involvement in these affairs of West Asia. You can't simply brush it aside by saying the American under no conditions would be involved. Yes, today there is no direct involvement. There is a possibility Americans may involve after America remains very much inside power, a power of West Asia. The real Pax Americana began since 1991. following this American unilateral security agreement signed with each Gulf countries, which is not there before. So America, by and large, remains the security provider for the vulnerable Gulf regimes. So that itself involves the risk of American involvement any period of time. You can't simply rule it out.
Okay, so that's a point well made. Dr. Awad, how significant are the three major battlegrounds in Syria, Iraq, and now in Yemen in rebalancing the regional power equations in West Asia?
Well, I think I will go with Ambassador Ranjit said and Professor Mahapatra, and would like to add one important point here, is that the game players in the region is only changed. United States remain the hegemony, remain the chronology of the American policy toward West Asia is always based on the oil and Israeli security. So now when they have created this as a dominant area of the United States foreign policy in the region. Even they threatened the Soviet Union that time that even if you have any influence in this part of the world, we are reluctant to use a nuclear weapon to take you out. So I think now the change of the game plan has been set up. They have already armed all their cronies in the region, and they are now getting them into the act to enter fighting among the Arab states. The common ground for the Arab world was Israel only that brought Arab together. Now with the situation created in Syria, in Libya, in Egypt, and in Yemen, and in Iraq, it is just a creation of an interfighting, which is giving more of a sectarian line rather than being a common ground to fight
together. Would the outcome of these battles in Syria, in Iraq and in Yemen, would it impact the balance of power? That is the question.
Absolutely it will impact, because now before it was an Arab solution to the crisis, they made the crisis more into regional, more of an international intervention. Because if you look at Turkey at one hand, Iran at the other hand, and now you see the balance of power, it's both the countries and Pakistan as well, are trying to play a major role in the future stability in this part of the world. It's a clear indication that it's no more in the hand of the Arabs. So we have to be blamed for the mess we have created, and those leaders who have taken into account, did not take into account the public or the people aspiration, are responsible for the mess where we are in now.
Okay. Ambassador Gupta, do you agree with Dr. Awad?
Yes, of course. You know, we are just going around the same thing. Yeah. In the sense that, obviously, as I said, America was the dominant power from 1945 onwards. So there's no two ways about American dominance anywhere in the world.
But the level of participation?
It is withdrawing from active intervention. Yeah. Behind the scenes, it may encourage A, B, and C to do this, that, and the other, but it's not actively participating itself.
But is it attempting to stabilize the balance of power? Because that alone will prevent it from sending troops and getting involved in conflicts.
I don't understand the meaning of balance of power, because it has signed the nuclear deal with Iran. It is now progressively going to have a normal relationship with Iran. Till now, it had a hostile relationship with Iran. So to that extent, both Iran and Saudi Arabia will have to start playing their own games and try and protect their own turfs themselves.
Okay, so we're going to discuss this further, but we need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again with this interesting discussion in a bit. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are discussing the changes taking place in West Asia. Professor Mahapatra, you wanted to say something before we went on the break.
Yeah. I just wanted to add what you said. Basically, the balance of power is a concept to an extent doesn't apply to the West Asian regional scenario, precisely because the peculiar characteristic of West Asia is a multipolar in nature. We have more than one power, more than two powers. We have Saudi Arabia, we have Egypt, we have Iran, we have Turkey, to an extent Syria, though it's kind of failing state. So you have multiple powers, all competing for some kind of primacy in the region. Here, and that itself creates the scope or the space for an extra-regional power like America to step in order to maximize its geopolitical interest in the region. So the dilemma for America in the wake of this deal being signed with Iran is how best America could balance its interests between the Saudis on the one side and the Iran on the other.
But isn't America following a complex strategy? Because its strategy seems to be such that in some theaters it finds opposing Iran, in some other theaters it's operating along with Iran.
Exactly.
So in Yemen you are opposing them, but in Syria you're forced to, and in Iraq you're forced to fight along with them, the Islamic State.
It's true. That's the risk. I tell you, is the real predicament for the American policymakers. It's extremely difficult for them to balance. Either they have to go with Saudis or they have to go with Iranians. and keeping in mind the sectarian division out there. And look at the Saudis have been trying to give a sectarian, like color to the entire conflict. Yeah. That explains why they have sought the military help from the Pakistanis and Turks. They're trying to give this kind of color to the entire conflict.
So let me take that question to Dr. Awad. So Dr. Awad, how important is it to understand the Shia-Sunni divide in the Middle East? And is it an instrument which we can use to explain what's happening in the Middle East, or is just one of the explanations?
I think, Bharat, it is more of the Saudi-created Wahhabist, Salafist against the rest of the Islam. If you look at this picture, I don't know if your viewers can have a look. Can you focus on this picture? You can see the Shah of Iran and the King of Saudi Arabia kissing his hand. Now, when the Shah of Iran was friendly with the United States, having Israeli embassy in Tehran, he was allowed to go and they could show their loyalty to him. Now, when the Islamic revolution has come, and they have changed the paradigm of the games, that they wanted to replace it with a Shia-Sunni fight in the region. So the creation of Taliban was part of that on itself. The fight in Afghanistan was part of this. Al-Qaeda was created, IS was created, which is an offshoot of this one. So therefore, the shift to give it the tag of an Arab-Sunni-Shia fight, it has been always there in the mindset of the House of Al Saud. Because if you look at what's happening in the GCC country, barring Oman, most of the GCC looked by the American as a COO. They can replace a king, they can replace an emir, bring his son, bring his father, bring his cousin, and then they run, you pay the arm for us. The doctrine of the military doctrine of US have changed. From putting footholds on the ground into not putting foothold on the grounds, let the Arabs kill each other and they pay the bills. Okay. So that is what's going to happen in the ground.
All right. Ambassador Gupta, you were saying earlier that the nuclear deal between Iran, US, at P5+1 countries, will change the shape of West Asia. Now, does that deal also amount to US accepting the domination of Iran in large parts of that region?
Accepting ground realities. Iran alone by itself has more capability, comprehensive national power and capabilities than all the 6 GCC countries put together. What is going to happen is that it is a recognition of ground realities, that Iran being the most powerful, it's a civilizational state, it's a centuries old, very rich civilization, will be allowed to play the role that its attributes suggest it should be playing. It was artificially prevented from doing so, and that will happen. Now, Saudi Arabia, whether it likes it or not, will have to adjust to these realities. If it tries to, as it has tried, as Dr. Weil has explained, sectarianism was not necessarily a thing which was there. It has been created to counter Iran, particularly post the Islamic revolution. Now, you cannot continue with that process. And certainly Yemen by no means is a sectarian conflict. It is an internal conflict which is being made into, which is being given a sectarian color directly by Saudi intervention or Saudi-led intervention.
But why, even in Iraq, why is the head of the Quds force going there and fighting along with the Shias against the Sunnis? So once Iran starts doing this, it ends up giving a Shia-Sunni color to the conflict.
Mind you, the Iranian intervention or involvement in a high-profile manner in Iraq began even before the formal proclamation of the ISIS. And that is entirely the consequence of the axis of evil remark and the unilateral invasion of Iraq. So it is not that Iran went on its own. A Shia government was created thanks to the American intervention. The Shia governments, the Shias suddenly came
and then
up.
Iran plays the Shia game. Or joins the Shia-Sunni conflict.
No, I do not say that Iran plays the Shia game.
Okay.
The local politicians in Iraq, who now they are asserting Shia power, and they are seeking Iranian assistance, which was provided.
So Professor Mahapatra, while nuclear sanctions were in place, a sort of a weakened Iran or a cornered Iran could still extend its influence in the region substantially. It de facto controlled Beirut, Damascus, Baghdad, and now even Sana'a. Yeah. Now, the point is that how would Iran's influence in West Asia increase now that sanctions are likely to be lifted and its economy will flourish and more oil money will start flowing in its coffers?
It will definitely. You see, it will definitely extend its influence in terms of how effective its regional policy would be, not necessarily sending its troops to Sana'a or to Damascus, for example. Perhaps the Iranians have somehow, like moved away from this policy of confrontation, like from these early 1980s onwards, when there's a call for the export of revolutions, which led to the creation of the Hezbollah or the Party of God in early 1980s in Lebanon. Things have changed now. We find the sign of moderation in Iranian foreign policy, moving here from confrontation to kind of compromise. And this doesn't mean Iran is not an ambitious regional power. It still is. And how best is going to exert its influence, whether through its hard power capability or through its soft power, or for exerts having its proxies and some amount of political influence in the domestic affairs of Iraq, post-Saddam Iraq, or in Yemen, or in, for example, Syria to an extent, that remains to be seen. I have a feeling that the Iranians have become more moderate than what they used to before.
Okay. Quickly, do you agree with the role of Iran as they see it emerging?
Well, Iran is a power to reckon with, whether we like it or not. The mistake is of the Arab that we allow the Iranian to have influence in our own politics when we are not even prosecuting our minorities. The majority Shia in Iraq were prosecuted by Saddam Hussein. When the American came, they give that impression that it is now the Shia in a golden platter given to Iran. And that is where the incitement and the terrorism started growing, and Al-Qaeda in Iraq grown up with you remember with Abu Mus'ab al-Zarqawi, who came from Afghanistan, and he started manufacturing with the Iraq, with the Saudis' money and the Qataris' money. So therefore, Iran has to be a force to reckon with. If the American and P+5+1 can sit down across the table and discuss with Iran in a more dialogue manner, in a long, patient way, and we are only busy in doing rag, while the Iranian make a carpet, and making carpet need patience. So they are patiently able to influence themselves. It is a fight between the regional players, among who will be the American ally in the region, whether it's Israel, that they have fought with Egypt, whether it is Saudi Arabia, which does not have any parameter of being a superpower in the region. It's Iran now, which is now coming in the picture, where the American feel that this is what will fill up the vacuum on that part of the world.
All right, we need to take a break at this point. We'll continue this discussion in a bit. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're discussing the changes taking place in West Asia. Ambassador Gupta, do you think that the Arab monarchies look at the rise of Iran in a binary and existential term? And would that put them closer to Israel, a traditional enemy? Because they seem to share the same fears about the rise of Iran.
As Professor Mahapatra said, 2 years down the line, for example, there could be another administration in the US, and the policies could be changed. At the moment, you have Netanyahu sitting in Israel, who is extremely right-wing. You could have another regime in Israel, and things could change. And not all the monarchies are Oman has an excellent relationship with Iran. It has always had. In fact, its relationship with Iran is better than its bilateral relationship with any GCC.
It didn't join the GCC force. It didn't join the GCC force.
It's much better. So it is a Saudi crusade at the moment. And Saudi Arabia simply will have to tone this down a bit.
Are they exaggerating the rise of Iran?
No, they are not. They are upset about the rise of Iran, and frustrated. They cannot do anything about it.
All right. Professor Mahapatra, how vital is the role of Turkey in the region? After all, it's the largest economy in the region. It has the largest army. And Ankara has now of late started accusing Iran of trying to dominate the region. So how do you see Turkey's role evolving?
See, Turkey's role has changed now since this crisis started in Syria. The whole glib talk about, like economic interdependence, zero problem policy with the neighbors, it's just suffered a huge setback in the wake of this outbreak of the civil war in Syria. So it has started looking, at its or reviewing its own regional foreign policy. So Turkey will at best try to act as a balancer, you see. It will not go to the extent which would antagonize the Saudis, nor it will take up kind of hostile position vis-a-vis Iran. Because at the moment, the Turks are more interested in consolidating themselves, particularly domestically. Economic at the moment not doing so well. And the Erdogan government also is facing domestic problems at the moment. And they have this problem of Islamic fundamentalism as well. So they will try to act with certain amount of restraint. Those days are gone, you see.
Dr. Awad, do you think Turkey will evolve into the third leg of a regional balance involving Saudi Arabia and Iran, as Professor Mahapatra is suggesting?
I won't suggest because, as long as Erdogan is in power, because this is the Islamist party which is trying to promote and sell out their own story of the Arab world, where we have started the Arab uprising in the northern African state, including Syria now. Turkey has always had a lust of the territories, ambition to conquer from Syria and Iraq as well. These are especially the rich oil. And that is why IS is actually, we call it in Syria, is Erdogan is the current Khalifa and the proxy de facto is a Baghdadi. It's a fact. And it has to be dealt in that manner.
Okay, now let's leave West Asia and its internal politics aside for a minute, Ambassador Gupta. How does a changing West Asia, the new power equations that are emerging, how does it impact India?
There is no easy answer to this question, but because we have very limited time, the fact of the matter is that there is no region in the world except our direct neighborhood which impacts the potential of our welfare as West Asia does, because of our oil dependence, 7 million Indians there, the possibility of radicalization of the Muslim population, 180 million. So there is potentially a great interest. India cannot do anything to influence what is happening on the ground there. India does not have the capability or influence to do that. So India should keep away from that. But in the longer term, all this divisiveness that is going on in this region, the fighting, India's example is something that the Arabs and everybody should look at. How have we, the most diverse nation on earth, a country which came into existence politically, what we did in January 26, 1950, India has never existed in history before.
Absolutely.
It's a miracle, given so much of fighting that goes on everywhere in the world. So India's example is phenomenal. Now just take this small matter of evacuation. We did 178,000 in 1991, the world's largest peaceful civilian evacuation. Again, we have done the largest from Yemen. And we've also brought back about 900 nationals of 46 different countries. So we have capability, we have enormous amount of goodwill, but it's all soft power. It is example. So India is not going to be adversely affected. Nobody is against India.
Professor Mahapatra, all this is fine, but do you think in the long run we'll have to rethink our relationship with some of these countries, or do you think we can continue as we've been doing up to now?
See, rethinking, yes, is required at times, but at the moment I don't think so, because see, India cannot totally lean towards either Iran 180 degree, taking a turn from a kind of relationship that we have established Saudi Arabia since 8 years. Saudi King was the guest in the Republic Day period during the UPA regime. So we will try to maintain the equidistance between both sides, because we should not get entrenched, inadvertently otherwise, in the sectarian conflict rising in the region. But our concern essentially is the Islamic fundamentalism, Islamic or the jihadi terrorism. There's a possibility, if the chaos persists in the region, there's a possibility of the resurgence of the jihadi terrorism again, which will
we're running out of time. Dr. Awad, last word. You said you wanted to say something about India.
I think there are lots of lessons you can learn from the Arab world. I think if there are remnants within the colonial power who think that those states created post-colonial era is going to create the havoc in the region and those stable countries as India as an established, well-democratized system in this region. I think these are the countries which have been created will create the problem for India. India is an extension a natural extension with the Arab world. So there is a nuclear, there is a oil security, energy security. There is also the geopolitics. There is also the Indian expats in the Arab world, which India has to be more cautious and active in dealing with the stabilizing the region. I think the more important message here should go from the Indian side to the rest of the world, that let the people of the region deal with their own crisis rather than foreign intervention always create a mess.
Okay, on that note, we've really run out of time. I'd like to thank Dr. Vailawat, Professor Ashwini Mahapatra, Ambassador Ranjit Gupta for participating in this discussion. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again next week as usual. Till then, goodbye and thanks for watching India's World.